Welcome back, history lovers. What if I told you that one single day, September 21st, holds the power to reveal the fall of empires, the birth of nations, devastating natural disasters, and even the release of stories that shaped our imagination? Today, we'll uncover the shocking moment when France abolished its monarchy forever, the day India's Mughal dynasty collapsed, the world's very first cowboy movie, the publication of Tolkien's legendary The Hobbit, the chaos of a hurricane that destroyed entire communities, and the rise of trailblazers who changed politics, law, and human rights forever. But here's the twist. Every one of these events isn't just history. Each of them created ripples that still touch your life today. By the end of this video, you'll see how a king's downfall, a woman's courage, or even a single book could change the course of the entire world. So, stay tuned, because history isn't just about the past, it's about you. Let's take a journey back to Paris in the year 1792. The city is restless. Bread prices have soared, unemployment is rampant, and the once powerful monarchy is hanging by a thread. For years, France had been living under the shadow of debt, failed harvests, and political corruption. The French Revolution, which had erupted in 1789 with the storming of the Bastille, had already shaken the very foundations of the old regime. But now, things were about to change forever. On September 21st, the newly formed National Convention met in Paris. These were not just ordinary politicians, they were revolutionaries. Some were fiery radicals, like the Jacobin, demanding sweeping change. Others were moderates, cautious but aware that the monarchy had lost all legitimacy. And together, they made a decision that stunned Europe. They abolished the monarchy and declared France a republic. Imagine what this meant at the time. For centuries, the King of France was considered divinely appointed. The monarchy was not just a government, it was an institution tied to religion, tradition, and national identity. By abolishing it, the revolutionaries weren't just changing rulers. They were rewriting the very idea of sovereignty. Power no longer came from God or bloodlines, it was to come from the people. But what pushed them to take such a drastic step? The immediate trigger was war. France was already at war with Austria and Prussia, who feared that revolutionary ideas would spread across Europe and threaten their own thrones. Inside France, royalists conspired against the revolution. Many accused King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette of betraying the nation by secretly collaborating with foreign enemies. Trust in the monarchy had evaporated. And so, the guillotine, an invention meant to deliver swift and equal justice, loomed over the king's head. Within months, Louis XVI would be tried and executed, shocking not just France but the entire world. Monarchs across Europe trembled. If the French king could be dethroned and killed, what would stop their own people from rising up? The declaration of the French Republic was more than just a political act, it was a radical blueprint for modern democracy. Ideas like citizenship, universal rights, and popular sovereignty began to take root. The revolution inspired independence movements in Latin America, reformers in Italy, and even thinkers in the young United States, who watched closely as France experimented with liberty on a massive scale. But let's not romanticize it entirely. The fall of the monarchy also unleashed years of bloodshed. The reign of terror would soon follow, with thousands executed in the name of revolution. Wars spread across Europe as kings and emperors tried to crush the republic. France itself was torn apart by internal divisions, royalists, revolutionaries, moderates, and radicals, all fighting for their vision of the future. Still, this moment, September 21st, 1792, was a turning point in world history. It showed that monarchy was not inevitable, that ordinary people, through revolution, could seize power and reshape their destiny. Democracy, as fragile as it was, now had a living example on a national scale. Think about this. Every time we talk about human rights, elections, or the power of the people we are, in some way, echoing the legacy of that single day in Paris, the guillotine may have silenced a king, but it gave birth to an idea that still shapes our world. Now, let's travel east, to India, in the year 1858. For more than 3 centuries, the Mughal Empire had ruled the subcontinent. At its height, it was one of the greatest empires in the world, stretching from Afghanistan to Bengal, from Kashmir to the Deccan. Its emperors, known as the Great Mughals, built wonders like the Taj Mahal and the Red Fort. blending Persian, Islamic, and Indian traditions into a unique and dazzling civilization. But by the mid-19th century, that empire was only a shadow of its former self. The once mighty Mughal throne in Delhi was weak, reduced to a symbolic role. Real power had slipped into the hands of the British East India Company, a private trading corporation that had, step by step, conquered territories and built an empire of its own. The breaking point came in 1857, with the Great Indian Rebellion, also known as the Sepoy Mutiny. Indian soldiers, or sepoys, rose up against British officers, outraged by cultural disrespect, economic exploitation, and the sense that their traditions were under attack. For a brief moment, the rebels rallied under the banner of the Mughal Emperor, Bahadur Shah II, an old man in his 80s, more poet than ruler. They declared him the symbolic leader of their uprising, hoping to restore the glory of the past. But the rebellion was brutally crushed. The British responded with overwhelming force. Villages were burned, thousands executed, and the rebellion drowned in blood. In the aftermath, the British decided that the time for pretense was over. The East India Company was dissolved, and on November 1, 1858, Queen Victoria of Britain was proclaimed the Sovereign of India. The Mughal dynasty was officially abolished. Bahadur Shah II, the last Mughal emperor, was arrested. He was tried for treason and exiled to Rangoon. In Burma, the once glorious peacock throne was gone, the Red Fort emptied of power. And with his departure, 3 centuries of Mughal rule came to a quiet, tragic end. But the fall of the Mughal Empire was not just the end of a dynasty, it was the beginning of something much larger. The British Raj for nearly 90 years, India would be ruled directly by the British Crown. Its people subjected to colonial exploitation that transformed the economy, the culture, and even the very landscape of the subcontinent. Railroads were laid, industries expanded, but millions also faced poverty, famine, and the loss of sovereignty. Still, the memory of the Mughal Empire did not die. For many Indians, the idea of resistance and independence remains tied to the dream of self-just, as their ancestors had once lived under Indian emperors. Poets, nationalists, and reformers in the 19th and 20th centuries would look back to the fall of 1858 and see not just a defeat, but a reminder of what had been lost and what might one day be regained. So, when we speak of September 1858, we are not only marking the end of an empire, we are also witnessing the start of a new chapter, the clash between colonialism and the struggle for independence. The Mughal dynasty faded into history, but its fall ignited the fire of nationalism that would almost a century later give birth to modern India and Pakistan. Think about it. The last Mughal emperor, exiled far from home, could hardly imagine that his downfall would become a symbol of resistance. His empire was gone, but his memory lived on, shaping the destiny of an entire subcontinent. Let's jump to the year 1903, in the United States. The world of entertainment was about to change forever, not on a theater stage, not in a circus ring, but on the flickering screen of a brand new invention, the motion picture. That year, a short film called Kit Carson premiered. At first glance, it was simple. Grainy black and white footage, actors moving a little stiffly, scenes stitched together with no sound, no dialogue. And yet, this film marked the birth of something huge, the Cowboy movie. Kit Carson was based on the legendary frontiersman of the same name, a real figure from the 19th century who had become larger than life in American folklore. The film dramatized his adventures on the frontier, gunfights, chases, and the taming of the Wild West. For audiences of 1903, it was thrilling. Remember, this was the same year the Great Train Robbery hit the screens often, called the first true narrative film. Together, these works laid the foundation for an entirely new genre. Why did cowboy films capture the imagination so powerfully? Because they spoke to America's identity? The country was only a generation removed from the real frontier. Railroads had been built, territories settled, Native American tribes forced from their lands. The cowboy film offered a way to relive, romanticize, and sometimes distort that frontier past. It turned history into myth-painting the Wild West as a place of adventure, danger, and rugged individualism. Soon, audiences couldn't get enough. Cowboy hats, horses galloping across the plains, heroic gunfighters, and dramatic showdowns became staples of cinema. By the 1920s, westerns were dominating Hollywood. By the 1950s, They were among the most popular genres in the world, shaping not only film but also fashion, music, and even politics. John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, Sergio Leone, these names all owe a debt to that first spark in 1903. But Kit Carson was more than just entertainment. It reflected how nations tell stories about themselves. Just as France celebrated its revolution, or Britain glorified its empire, America found its myths in the cowboy, the lone figure riding into the sunset, representing freedom, toughness, and self-reliance. Of course, these films often ignored the harsher realities: the violence against Native Americans, the struggles of settlers, the complex truths of the frontier. Yet the myth was powerful, and it spread worldwide. Think about it. When people in Europe, Asia, or Africa imagined America in the 20th century, what image came to mind? Not Wall Street or Washington, but the cowboy. The leather boots, the revolver, the endless desert under a blazing sun. And all of that traces back, in part, to that little silent movie in 1903, Kit Carson. So, when the audience of that year watched a cowboy gallop across a silent screen, they weren't just watching a story. They were witnessing the birth of a cultural icon. A new language of cinema was being written, one that would echo through the decades. From black and white reels to Technicolor epics, all the way to modern blockbusters. The premiere of Kit Carson may have lasted only a few minutes on screen, but its impact still rides on today. Every time we see a cowboy hat, hear the twang of a guitar, or watch a showdown in the dust. Step into 1937, a time when the world was still recovering from economic depression and inching closer to global conflict. Amidst this backdrop, a story unlike any other quietly appeared on bookstore shelves. The Hobbit, by J.R.R. Tolkien. This wasn't just another children's book. It was an invitation to a fully realized world. Middle-earth, a place of dwarves, elves, dragons, and an unassuming hobbit named Bilbo Baggins. Tolkien's rich imagination and meticulous world-building gave readers something they had never experienced before. A completely immersive fantasy universe with its own languages, maps, and history. Why was The Hobbit so revolutionary? Because at a time when literature was dominated by realism and social commentary, Tolkien dared to create a mythic adventure. He combined elements of folklore, Norse sagas, and his own philological expertise to craft something timeless. Readers could escape the harsh realities of the 1930s rising political tensions in Europe, economic struggles, the looming threat of war, and lose themselves in a journey of courage, friendship, and discovery. Consider Bilbo's character, small, ordinary, and seemingly insignificant, yet capable of extraordinary deeds. This archetype, a reluctant hero rising to the occasion, would influence generations of storytelling. From fantasy novels to blockbuster films, every element of The Hobbit, from the riddles with Gollum to the epic confrontation with Smaug the dragon, established the blueprint for modern fantasy. The book was also significant for Tolkien's scholarship. As a professor of Anglo-Saxon at Oxford, he infused the story with linguistic depth and historical resonance. Middle-earth didn't feel like a fictional setting. It felt like a living, breathing world with its own cultures, languages, and traditions. Readers could trace lineages, histories, and even songs within the narrative. The impact of The Hobbit didn't stop at literature. It inspired a generation of artists, writers, and filmmakers. By the time The Lord of the Rings was published, 2 decades later, Tolkien had cemented his status as the father of modern high fantasy. His influence extends to today's video games, movies, and role-playing worlds, where immersive storytelling and elaborate world-building are standard. And yet, The Hobbit was deceptively simple. At its heart, it was about adventure, courage, and the unexpected hero within us all. It reminded readers that even the smallest person can change the course of the world. Think about it. A quiet English professor writes a book in the 1930s. And today, millions worldwide know the name Bilbo Baggins and dream of Publishing The Hobbit was more than a literary milestone. It was the beginning of a cultural revolution. It showed that stories could transport people, build worlds, and inspire imagination in ways that textbooks, newspapers, or historical accounts never could. Tolkien's creation wasn't just a book. It was a gateway to infinite possibilities. Step into 1938, a world on the brink of war, yet brimming with technological innovation. On this day, the BBC aired its very first television news broadcast. It was a moment that would forever transform how humans received and consumed information. Before television, people relied heavily on newspapers, radio, and word of mouth to know what was happening in their world. The BBC's pioneering broadcast brought visuals to the news faces, locations, events, right into living rooms across the United Kingdom. For viewers, it was a revolutionary shift. Instead of imagining events described in print, they could now see them unfold. Consider the technical challenges of the time. Cameras were bulky, transmission systems were primitive, and live broadcasting was fraught with difficulty. The broadcast wasn't just a test of technology. It was a test of human ingenuity and ambition. Every image transmitted, every announcement spoken, represented years of research and experimentation. The first broadcast was modest, yet its impact was profound. It laid the foundation for modern television journalism, influencing everything from evening news shows to live war reporting decades later. The idea that people could witness global events in real time changed society politically, socially, and culturally. In retrospect, that day in 1938 wasn't just about a news report. It marked the beginning of an era where information would be immediate, where governments, corporations, and ordinary citizens had to adapt to a world that moved faster than ever before. Television was no longer a novelty, it became a powerful force that shaped public perception and understanding. Later, in 1938, nature struck with a fury that still echoes in history books. The Great New England Hurricane made landfall, devastating Long Island and the broader New England region. Winds exceeded 120 miles per hour, obliterating homes, uprooting trees, and claiming over 600 lives. This hurricane wasn't just another storm, it was a wake-up call. Meteorology at the time was still in its infancy. There were no satellite images, limited early warning systems, and minimal forecasting models. Communities were largely unprepared for the sheer scale of the disaster. Entire towns were submerged. Infrastructure, roads, bridges, and communication lines was destroyed. Livelihoods were obliterated, and countless families faced unimaginable loss. The economic impact was severe, with businesses, farms, and fisheries suffering catastrophic damage. Yet, in the aftermath, the resilience of New Englanders shone through communities, came together to rebuild homes, restore services, and create emergency preparedness measures that would influence future disaster management in the United States. The Great New England Hurricane also transformed meteorology. Scientists studied the storm meticulously, learning lessons that would improve tracking, forecasting, and understanding of hurricanes. It remains one of the most powerful and deadly hurricanes in U.S. history, a stark reminder of nature's might and humanity's enduring capacity to respond. 1955, a year that may seem ordinary on the surface, yet quietly, a revolution was beginning in the United States. In San Francisco, a group of brave women founded the Daughters of Bilitis, the first organization in America dedicated to lesbian rights. At the time, being openly LGBTQ+ was dangerous. Society criminalized same-sex relationships, and those who dared to live authentically faced harassment, job loss, and even imprisonment. Against this backdrop of fear and oppression, the Daughters of Bilitis offered a safe space, a community where women could meet, share experiences, and support one another without judgment. The organization wasn't just social, it was political and educational. They published a newsletter, The Ladder, which discussed issues of rights, identity, and equality ideas that mainstream society often ignored or suppressed. Through these pages, lesbian voices were amplified, creating a ripple effect that would inspire activism across the country. Imagine the courage it took to organize in secret, to speak out when doing so could bring danger. These women planted the seeds for the LGBTQ+ rights movement, shaping conversations about gender, sexuality, and freedom in ways that are still relevant today. The founding of the Daughters of Bilitis marked more than the creation of an organization. It was a declaration that every human being deserves dignity, visibility, and a chance to live authentically. And on September 21st, 1955, that declaration, quietly but powerfully, began to change the course of history. September 21st, 1964, a small island nation in the heart of the Mediterranean achieved a monumental milestone. Malta, after centuries of foreign rule, finally gained independence from the United Kingdom. Think about it, Malta had been governed by the British since 1814, yet the Maltese people never lost their sense of identity, culture, and resilience. Independence wasn't just a political change, it was the culmination of decades of struggle, negotiation, and a determined push for the island, strategically located between Europe and North Africa, had long been a coveted naval base. Its harbors, fortresses, and geographic position made it essential for military and trade purposes. But for the Maltese, independence meant more than strategic significance. It symbolized control over their own destiny. The new nation faced immense challenges. Economically, Malta had to build systems for education, healthcare, and infrastructure that had previously been managed by colonial powers. Politically, leaders had to unite a population that had experienced centuries of external rule, while navigating the complex Cold War dynamics of the Mediterranean region. Yet the spirit of the Maltese people shone through. Independence brought hope, pride, and a renewed sense of cultural identity. It was a statement to the world that even the smallest nations could assert their sovereignty, protect their heritage, and participate meaningfully on the global stage. September 21st, 1964, wasn't just a date on a calendar, it was a triumph of perseverance, national identity, and the unwavering belief in self-determination. Malta had emerged from the shadows of empire into the light of independence. September 21st, 1981, a new nation was born in Central America. Belize, formerly British Honduras, officially gained independence from the United Kingdom. For centuries, Belize had been under colonial rule, its rich lands and dense jungles overseen by distant powers. But the people of Belize had maintained their unique cultural identity, shaped by the Garifuna Maya, Mestizo, Creole, and other communities. Independence meant that, for the first time, they could govern themselves and make decisions reflecting their own history, needs, and aspirations. Think about the significance. This was more than a political ceremony, it was the culmination of decades of negotiation, activism, and careful diplomacy. Leaders like George Price, the country's first prime minister, had worked tirelessly to ensure a smooth transition to sovereignty. Independence also came with immense challenges. Belize had to build institutions for governance, security, and the economy from scratch. International recognition, border disputes with Guatemala, and internal unity were all pressing concerns. Yet the people celebrated, waving flags, singing their national anthem, and stepping into a future they had long dreamed of. The moment Belize became independent was a powerful reminder. Even small nations can claim their place in the world, honor their heritage, and shape their destiny. September 21st, 1981 stands as a testament to resilience, unity, and the enduring desire for self. On September 21st, 1981, a historic milestone was achieved in the United States. Sandra Day O'Connor was sworn in as the first female justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. Before her appointment, the Supreme Court had been an exclusively male institution for nearly 2 centuries. O'Connor's nomination by President Ronald Reagan was a moment of both progress and scrutiny. People across the nation watched closely, some celebrating, others skeptical of a woman in such a powerful judicial role. O'Connor brought a unique perspective to the court, grounded in practicality, fairness, and a deep understanding of the law. Her presence paved the way for future generations of women in law, government, and leadership positions. She became a role model, demonstrating that expertise, intelligence, and perseverance know no gender. The implications of her appointment were enormous. Decisions she contributed to shaped American society on issues ranging from reproductive rights to federalism, from individual liberties to state powers. And beyond the rulings, her very existence on the bench challenged societal norms, proving that women could excel in the highest arenas of governance. Sandra Day O'Connor's ascension wasn't just a personal achievement, it was a transformative moment in American history, opening doors, inspiring millions, and signaling a new era for equality and representation in the judiciary. On September 21st, 1991, a historic moment unfolded as Armenia declared its independence from the Soviet Union. After decades under Soviet control, the Armenian people finally took a bold step towards self. The path to independence was fraught with challenges. Armenia faced economic hardship, political uncertainty, and the ongoing conflict over Nagorno-Karabakh. Yet, the desire for national identity, cultural preservation, and political freedom drove the movement forward. Independence wasn't just a political declaration, it was a cultural and emotional rebirth. Ancient traditions, language, and a unique heritage, long overshadowed by external control, could now flourish openly. Public squares filled with celebrations, flags were raised, and citizens embraced the dawn of a new era. International recognition soon followed, and Armenia began building diplomatic relationships with other nations. The independence of Armenia symbolized the broader dissolution of the Soviet Union, inspiring other republics to seek autonomy and reshape the geopolitical landscape of Eastern Europe. This day marked the beginning of Armenia's journey as a sovereign nation, a story of resilience, identity, and the enduring human desire for freedom. It reminds us that even after decades of oppression, a people's will to self-govern can change history. On September 21, 1999, Taiwan was struck by a devastating 7.7 magnitude earthquake, one of the deadliest in its modern history. Known as the 9/1 earthquake, it caused massive destruction across central Taiwan, claiming over 2,400 lives and injuring tens of thousands. Entire towns were leveled, bridges and roads crumbled, isolating communities and making rescue operations extremely difficult. Families lost homes, schools, and workplaces. The human toll was immense, and the psychological impact resonated for years. But, in the face of tragedy, Taiwan demonstrated extraordinary resilience. Emergency responders, volunteers, and international aid rushed to the affected regions. Communities came together, rebuilding homes and lives with determination and solidarity. This earthquake wasn't just a natural disaster, it became a moment that reshaped Taiwan's approach to disaster preparedness and urban planning. Building codes were strengthened, early warning systems improved, and citizens were educated on emergency response. The 921 earthquake reminds us of nature's immense power and humanity's capacity for resilience, cooperation, and recovery. September 21, 1999, is a date forever etched in Taiwan's history, a story of tragedy, courage, and renewal. On September 21, 2019, the Albanian city of Durrës was rocked by a 5.6 magnitude earthquake, shaking the nation and leaving 49 people injured. Though smaller than some historic quakes, it caused significant structural damage, toppling buildings and displacing families. Residents experienced the sudden terror of walls cracking and streets trembling. Emergency services and local volunteers quickly mobilized, conducting rescues and providing aid. The earthquake highlighted the vulnerability of older buildings and the critical importance of urban preparedness. Communities came together to rebuild, and lessons were learned for future earthquake mitigation. This event served as a modern reminder that natural disasters can strike anywhere, affecting both lives and infrastructure in a matter of seconds. September 21, 2019, will be remembered indoors not only for the destruction, but also for the resilience, solidarity, and determination of the people to recover and protect their city against future threats. And that's a wrap on September 21st in history, a single day that reminds us just how much the world can change over centuries. From the dramatic fall of monarchies in revolutionary France to the founding of LGBTQ advocacy groups, from groundbreaking cultural milestones like Tolkien's The Hobbit to natural disasters that tested human resilience, this date is packed with lessons, courage, and transformation. Every event we explored today, whether it was political upheaval, literary genius, or the force of nature, shaped the world in ways we still feel today. History isn't just a collection of dates, it's a story of humanity, of triumphs, struggles, and the endless pursuit of progress. If you found these stories fascinating, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to keep traveling through time with us. Leave a comment below. What event from September 21st do you think had the biggest impact on the world? Was it the rise of new freedoms, a cultural breakthrough, or a natural disaster that changed lives? Remember, history is alive, and every story we uncover brings us closer to understanding our present and shaping our future. Thank you for watching, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next video.